Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today. My name is Gennadii Potapov. I'm CEO of Gennadii Arcade. Gennadii Arcade is a game development company based in Southeast Asia. Since our establishment in 2013, we've been dedicated to providing top-notch engineering outsourcing services with main focus on porting. Additionally to porting, we offer co-development services, enabling our clients to leverage our expertise and resources. Currently, we are a team with more than 50 specialists. Over the years, we've been fortunate enough to collaborate with a diverse range of clients, ranging from small indie developers to AAA studios and publishers. Some of the notable clients are Devolver Digital, Tiny Build, From Software, Sega, Capcom, and others. Gennadii Arcade was involved in development and work on following IPs and titles like Potioncraft, Control, Hotline Miami, Dragon's Dogma, Space Marine, and others. One aspect of work in Gennadii Arcade that brings me immense joy is to work on retro titles. And we have been fortunate enough to contribute to preservation and revival of several beloved titles from the past, including the games like Duke Nukem, Pathologic, Metal of Chaos, Shadow Warrior, Iron Fury, and many others. While some of these titles are maybe not widely known, there are definitely individuals who hold them dear to their hearts and consider those games their favorites from their childhood. It's truly rewarding experience to bring back those games back to life and reignite nostalgia. And there is undeniable thrill in making sure that those games being kept enjoyed by both the long-time fans and the new generation of players. One thing that I truly love about working on these titles is the technical challenges that they bring with them. Overcoming these challenges is not only a testament to our team's expertise, but brings the great sense of satisfaction. And today I want to talk about our path of resurrecting the Chasm Rift, what challenges we faced and what lessons we learned. So if you decided to do similar remaster, you will know what you're gonna face. Let's talk about the game. Please raise a hand if you even heard about the game. And maybe played the original game? No? Okay. And okay, for everyone, so that's the Chasm Rift is a first-person shooter developed by Ukrainian studio Action Form and released for DOS in September of 1997. So 26 years back. I was 10 when the game was released. And the game was heavily inspired by Quake, and it plays in a similar fashion. But for that time, it had the impressive quality of animation and models, and had an interactive and destructible environment. And one of the most unique features for that time, it had the enemy's dismemberment, which is silly but worked really well. Like, for example, you can shoot off both arms of the enemy soldier, and he will still try to chase you and kick you with his foot. And it was often referred as a Ukrainian Quake, or Slavs Quake, or Mom, can I please have a Quake? We have Quake at home. But internally, the game more resembled of Wolfenstein 3D, because it doesn't have it had a fixed ceiling height and didn't have room of the room. Despite that, clever use of level geometry and models masked those limitations, and resulting visuals were arguably better than Quakes in some of the areas. Despite the commercial failure of the game due to the bankruptcy of the publisher, the game still had a dedicated fan base and become inspiration for a new genre of so-called boomer shooters. Maybe you heard about the games like Dusk and Hrot. And I have a video of our remaster that we did. It's a trailer.
Our intelligence has received word of a disaster from one of the power stations. This looks very much like the actions of the Time Strikers.
We found that the monsters use energy fields in order to transport to our dimension. It's possible to use the energy of the pyramids to alter the flow of time. This is our only chance. We will send you through time. Earth depends on you.
Yeah. There is no one-size-fits-all definition for the remaster. People have different opinions and what it entails to remaster the game. While undertaking the remastering project, finding the right balance is crucial. It involves preserving the best aspects of the game, and while removing the limitations and making sure that the original feels still intact. Therefore, it's essential to define clear project requirements. SNEAC, the publisher of the game, they already had the vision in mind what they want from the remaster, but we still spend a lot of time communicating with them on what exactly we should do. And here's what we ultimately come up with. So we wanted to preserve the original gameplay, of course, and we didn't want to touch the game assets because that would mean that we need to discover how the original artwork pipeline worked. We want to support the older versions of Windows as well, because the fans of this kind of games, they like to stick to the older OSs. And again, we're talking about the game preservation, so we want to make sure the game available on a wide range of systems. We wanted to support for 64-bit for the future for the consoles, because the PlayStation and Xbox, they only support 64-bit binaries. We want to have a full 3D hardware accelerated rendering, because the original game was software rendered, which means that it has a low resolution, grainy look, low performance, and more importantly, it had a perspective distortion when you look up and down, which was common for these kind of games, similar to Duke Nukem 3D. Of course, we wanted to support the high resolution. The original game was 640 by 480. We want to have a widescreen support. Original game was 4:3, a locked frame rate, and no multiplayer. This thing we discussed a lot because the multiplayer was not the main feature of the game, so we wanted to concentrate on a single player only. Gamepad support, quality of life improvements like FOV slider, visual improvements, remastered audio, localization, Steam and GOG integration, and one of the really important things was that the game should be moddable. And we wanted support for the extra levels because the action forums later they released the pack of the levels. But we had a small problem, which I kind of spoiled in the title of the presentation. We didn't have a source code. Source code was lost. So what should we do? And we have two primary options to consider. First was to take Unity or Unreal Engine and try to implement all the functionality used in those engines. However, this method significant challenges, as there is no guarantee that we can reproduce all of these functionalities exactly and correctly. The second option was reverse engineering the original binary and using this extracted information to recreate all the gameplay features and details. This part requires extensive expertise and time to decipher the code and to understand inner workings of the original game. We decided to go with the later option, with the reverse engineering, because we believe that it would give us the more accurate results. And we already had experience with reverse engineering before, not to the same extent, but still. So what is reverse engineering? Reverse engineering, when we talk about software, it means deconstruction of original binary to extract the design information. And as we deal with the native applications, it basically means disassembly, the translation of the machine code to assembly language. And this process is known to be really complicated, time-consuming, and tedious. So we had the binary which designed for DOS. It was a 16-bit binary with a Borland Pascal, and in total it had 766 functions, and 200 of them, almost 200 of them, were from runtime, which is operating system functions and math, which we didn't care much because we don't need them, and other functions, 566 functions, were directly related to Chasm. And by today's standards, it's a small game and doesn't have that many functions, but you need to consider that reverse engineering a single function can take from few hours to a few days and even weeks. But we got lucky. We found out that one of the versions that was shipped of the Chasm had the debug information. Developer probably forgot to remove it. So that information contained some of the names of the functions, structures, and variables. And with that information, it was easier for us to navigate through the assembly code and better understand the architecture of the game. Here is a really small function disassembled, and on the left you can see the names of the functions, so you can get the idea what it does and what other function it calls. And on the right, it's without the debug information. Let's closely look like this. Doesn't help that much if you don't know assembler, but still. And that's the resulting function. So as you can see, huge lines, a lot of lines of code on assembly, and only a few lines of code on C++. Okay, and the second time we got lucky when we found out that there is an open source fan-made attempt to reconstruct Chasm. So using that port, it was called Panzer Chasm, and by developer goes by the nickname Panzer. So using that port, you can somehow play the game, but unfortunately it was unfinished, and a lot of things were broken. Like rendering was not complete, AI was broken, effects were missing, and stuff like that, which is totally normal because it was a fan-made project. But developer, he did a tremendous job, trying to reconstruct, and he did it almost alone. And that project was really, really useful for us. We acquired license for this code, and we used this project as a scaffolding for our version. So it was really useful for us. We could concentrate on one subsystem, but all the connected subsystems were there, even though they're not accurate enough, but we can still work on those. Meaning, like, for example, if we need to work on AI, we still already have some rendering from the Panzer Chasm that we can replace later with more accurate our own version. And that's what we did. So we took all the subsystems and one by one recreated our own more accurate versions of that. Since the game was originally designed for the older systems, it suffered from the poor simulation precision. Each step of the game timer was equivalent to 10 milliseconds of real time. And furthermore, due to the limitations of 16-bit arithmetics, it suffered even to handle the 10 millisecond step, resulting in incorrect movement speed and direction. And this limited us to 30 to 50 frames per second before the game started acting weird because of logic breaks. So to make sure that the game can handle high refresh rates, we had to do some changes in the logic of the game. Simple things like storing the reminder of divisions and applying to the next frame. This improves the vector arithmetics and allows us to update enemies up to 100 times per frame. The camera is very sensitive to player movement, so for player projectiles and jeeps, we had to develop our own high precision colliders. And some of the logic we recreated from scratch to offload the job from the reverse engineering. Things like moving walls, event triggers, wind teleporters, and ambient sounds, and many more. And I believe we did really well combining reverse engineering and data mining to reconstruct and even enhance the game logic. So the Panzer Chasm, the open source project that I mentioned before, already had the 3D accelerated rendering using OpenGL. But as you know, OpenGL is good as that because it's not widely used. On the consoles, you can use it only on Switch. iOS, Mac already deprecated OpenGL. OpenGL uses the old paradigms of the development and new APIs like DirectX 12. It's different. So we decided just to scrape it and start it from scratch. And to support the modern graphic APIs, we use the framework called the Forge. So the Forge is a great cross-platform rendering framework. It's not without its quirks, but it's one of the best. It's open source that you can get right now. And it supports PC, Gen 8, Gen 9 consoles, even mobile as well. For example, Forge been used in No Man's Sky, Starfield, and Hades. Now about the important changes that made most impact to the visuals, apart from the high resolution and unlocked frame rate. Similar to Quake, all Chasm animations were implemented as a group of vertices per frame, and even the rotation of the objects were made as not as a rotation curve, but as a group of 3D models per frame. And the animation speed was inconsistent. Enemies frames updates at 16 frames per second and player weapons at 25. And to make the animation smooth, we introduced the interpolation between frames. For that, we had to do some changes in some of the models. And to avoid twitching between the states of the animation, we introduced the cross-fading. Next is the lighting and shadows have the most impact on the visuals of the game, especially older titles. And the game used the dynamic and static light maps. So first thing we did, we increased the dynamic light map size significantly. And now we store not only the light power for a given area, but four-channel contribution to all of the directions. And when we compute the light maps, we not only when we do calculate the light maps occlusion, we not only check the walls, but we check the transparent textures on the walls, so the light can propagate further. We render the scenes game scenes in HDR, so we have this information ready for post-processing. And we had some changes to improve the distance fade. The original game looks a little bit different because of software rendered, but we wanted to get it closer to the original dark and gray feel and aesthetics of the game. So for that, we introduced the tone mapping technique to enhance the limited color palette of the game. And we added a wide range of options for players to configure to their liking. Of course, we added anti-aliasing, which is a really simple post-processing effect, and we disabled it by default to preserve the retro feel of the game. And for people who believe that the game looks too crisp, we added pixelation, which is basically reducing the render resolution. That's a screenshot of a few of the options that we had. Some people may not agree with me, but a lot of older games, in all old games, audio and sounds doesn't age well. What I mean is, if you take a lower resolution texture or low poly model, it can still look retro and visually appealing. But with sounds, when it has a low bit rate that introduces crackling, it's not pleasing. So SNEC, the publisher, they hired the sound design studio to improve and produce new sound design, and we had to work really closely with them to make sure that the engine supports all the features required by sound design for the new sound design. With the help of reverse engineering and data mining, we figured out the original sound engine and built on top of it to support proper 3D positional audio, modern audio formats, and way to quickly switch between old audio formats, audio files, and the new one. And we spent a lot of time working on the debugging tools for the sound engineers, because it's an older game, and audio engineers they used to the tools that Fmod provides, which is really easy, but of course we cannot do that. So this is just a few screenshots of the debugging mode with the information like the name of the sound, the radius and volume. So it's easier to debug the sounds. At the beginning of the talk, I mentioned that we didn't want to touch the assets, because that would mean that we need to develop import and export tools for each type of the asset, because the game obviously used their own proprietary formats for everything. Unfortunately, once we increase the resolution of the game, the original bugs of the game start popping up. Things like holes in the level geometry, holes in the animation, in the models when the polygons doesn't converge at seams, and misaligned textures, missing textures. All of those were not noticeable when the game was on a lower resolution, but once we increase the resolution significantly, it's all noticeable. And another common issue appeared when we moved to full 3D rendering, which is Z-fighting. It's a texture flickering when two primitives have the similar distance to the camera. So we went through all the maps, fixing hundreds of these issues that we didn't expect that exist. And the original game was shipped with a level editor, so we used that to fix most of that. And for the models, we introduced the asset patch system that allowed us to drop in the updated version of the models in formats like GLTF and textures and PNG, and replace on the fly. And the same system is used for the modding right now. So the modders don't need to figure out the quirks of the old formats. They can just use the modern formats for that. And this screenshot, I don't know if it's visible. There's like a hole on this tunnel that we had to fix. Like on the left, there is some problems with the textures on the character, and again, it's not visible. This well has so many issues with the misaligned textures and looks terrible. So that small things like that, but when you have like hundreds of them. And for another thing that we just replaced straight away was the sky. For the original game, they used a single texture that will rotate and move when the player would look, which was weird when we moved to 3D rendering. So one texture we replaced with a 6 texture that formed the cube, which is a common technique, skybox. For localization, we had really ambitious plans to support 12 languages. Original game only came out in English and Russian, and we want to support 12 languages, including Chinese, Japanese, and Korean. Thankfully, the game didn't have that much text, It's only had text in menus, mission briefings, and some things in the games when messages when you pick up the keys and stuff like that. And also, there was the very experienced team was hired to support us, localization team called the Moss Games, and they also did the QA for us. And the team, they did all of the translations, but we still had a lot of issues integrating this in an old game. Mostly because of the fonts. Fonts on the game were bitmap and really tiny. And when you working with like Chinese characters, it's really hard to fit them. So we end up using 2 different fonts for each language. One we used in the main menu, like over here, and it was a bitmap font, and we had to render it for all of the languages. And for the other things, we used the dynamic true type fonts with some stylization. Once we finished with the PC version and a few patches, it was time to work on the consoles. And we wanted to ship game to all of the consoles, Gen 8 and Gen 9. And after the work that we laid out during the PC development, it looked like a really straightforward process. But unexpectedly, we faced the performance issues. We aimed for 120 frames per second on 4K at the Gen 9 consoles and 60 frames per second at 1080p on Gen 8 consoles. And it's really surprising, right? The game, really old game, doesn't look like requires much. But it's very interesting that there is a lot of misconceptions about how the performance work. Same types of GPU and CPU workloads can affect the PC and consoles differently. For example, one of the things that helped us to hit our target for the frame rate was memory optimization by using the compact rendering target formats. That's because the console GPUs, they are more affected by memory bandwidth. The second thing was that helped us to achieve the 120 frame rate on a Series X, Series S, was to downsampling of the sprites. So when there was like a big fight, a lot of things was happening on the screen. On 4K rendering, the frame rate started dipping, which was a small dip, but still kind of annoying. So for that, we basically rendered the sprites in a lower resolution, specifically on 4K, and then apply it to the 3D scene. We also improved the loading time between levels by loading all the assets at the beginning in the memory, because the game is tiny compared to previous games. So it's only like 500 megabytes, and you all can put everything in memory, and the loading of the levels will be instant. And then we went for the smaller things, like improving controls. We added a gyro support, full DualSense support, some changes to how the acceleration works, and we implemented the aim assist for ease of playing on the controllers. And then some quality of life improvements like customizable crosshair, introduced the custom difficulty, when player can select how many enemies they want and how much damage they do. And we even implemented small thing, but dynamic protagonist picture, like in Doom, when you have a Doom guy face reflecting how much damage you're taking. And then we added some accessibility options. Something that is not related directly to remastering, but important to mention, is making a demo. Thanks to the Steam Fest, demos on PC are popular again. And it's a good way to show players what's cooking and get some feedback, and maybe make some last-minute changes before releasing the game. That's exactly what happened with us. We got a lot of, when we released the demo, we got a lot of feedback, which was really important. But also even from the small things like missing decals from the bullets on walls, to really crucial issues with the controls. And while demos do not require a lot of time to prepare, their value cannot be overstated. So I recommend to do if you release a game on Steam, do the demos. Another tip that I have when I work on remasters, if you have this option, try to bundle the original game with the remastered. Players would be really grateful for the opportunity to play the game in original form, especially the players who never played the original game. Even if the original game doesn't run on modern systems, still bundle the game because that will open opportunity for the modders. In our case, the game was for DOS, so it kind of makes sense to ship the original game with the DOS box. But if you had a chance to try to configure DOS box, you know that it's really hard to configure the game to get a good performance. And over the years, people tried to do that for Chasm, and most of the attempts failed because the configuration the game was really slow. So they snagged the publisher. They hired developer of DOSBox to help us with that. And the result is the best way to play the original game in all its glory. So, in conclusion, remastering video games is a complex endeavor and requires carefully balancing changes and improvements while preserving the essence of the original experience. And with meticulous planning, technical expertise, and deep appreciation for original material, for source material, it's possible to successfully bring beloved title to the new era while honoring its legacy. Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions from the audience? Oh, great.
And I actually have some Go codes.
Yeah, so you did cover a little bit about that, but lately I was reading a lot of bad reviews of remaster games, like even the classic like StarCraft, like Warcraft, or my favorite Pharaoh game, and most of the time, new players expect something else entirely, and returning players are annoyed because of the lack of changes in UI and UX and stuff like that. So my question would be, have you encountered that kind of reviews, the bad ones, and what is the possible solutions for that? How to, yeah.
Yeah, like for example, for the new sound design, we envisioned that it will be a problem for some people. They want the original. That's why we had the option to switch back and forth. I guess it's really hard to please everyone, but we still have option to release patches. So if you listen to the players' feedback, you can fix those problems. And again, demo is a good, like I mentioned, it's a good thing. You can get this feedback first and maybe make some changes later.
Thank you. Do we have any other question?
Yes.
Yep.
Can I play on Steam Deck game?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Hello, thank you very much. Really impressive one. How long did you actually take to complete this remaster project?
So the PC version was around 6 months, and then around 5 months to release the console versions. It was five releases on consoles.
Excuse me. I'll pass you the microphone.
Yeah, thanks for the talk. So you mentioned you had like some experience with reverse engineering before. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit more? And let's say like during this process, at what point you understood like that you can actually pull it off? Like, did you have any shakings? Like, you know, like because it's like quite a dive, you know, like that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. So we had experience. We had really interesting projects when big AAA games wanted to release the game on different platforms, on the PC platforms, but they didn't want to provide a source code. Like we kind of afraid because you're a small studio, but we really want to put the game on a different store, let's say like Epic Game on GOG. So what we did, we reverse engineering the game, took out all the Steam functions, put the GOG functions back, and here you go. So it was a kind of small thing, right? And we had sometimes we had projects when the client they lost part of the code, like a small library, or they used some proprietary library that and the company doesn't exist anymore that produced that library. So we had to at least reverse engineer to understand the APIs and what it does, So it was a kind of small project. And in terms of like how we know that we can pull it off, we just knew that it's still kind of small project. So it's not that many functions. And again, like I mentioned before, like data mining helps as well. So you don't need to reverse engineer everything.
Yeah, do you feel like can remaster game be a bigger hit than the original one?
Wow, that's an interesting question. Like I'm sure that this version of Chasm has more players than the original. That's for sure. Like previously, we worked on Duke Nukem Megaton Edition, which was like more port than the remaster, and that game was released that version was released in 2013, and still the biggest selling digital release of Duke Nukem. So I guess it depends on how you define the success, and because now we have more players, then more players will play the game. If it's your definition of success, then yes.
Thank you. Do we have any other question? Oh my lord. That was fast.
My question is, any software project has a lot of bugs. The original game had bugs as well. I'm sure of it. And if you find such a bug, do you fix it? But it can alter the gameplay.
Yeah, that's true. That's one of the things that you need to balance, right? An original game had a lot of bugs as well. So some of them that doesn't introduce the gameplay changes, we obviously fix. That mostly related to the assets, right? And other thing we try to preserve as it is. Because I remember when we worked on Metal Wolf Chaos, we fixed a lot of things, and then players like, oh, now I cannot do the speed run. Can you please return it back? So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Dmitry, and I work with performance and compatibility too. And my question is, maybe you can provide some more information about performance issues, because at some point I lost track of your thoughts, and it's I can't still understand how this can happen. That such a project can result in some performance issues, because now hardware is really powerful. Your game uses very little memory, both graphics and RAM, and even one CPU or GPU unit is rather powerful for such a game. And finally, I think even 60 FPS is more than enough for such games. Maybe like users of high frame rate displays may argue, but still it works perfect with 60 FPS. So what were the performance issues, and how you, I don't know how to say, solve them?
Yeah, so we want to have 120 frames per second because we have this option, right? You need to go to the maximum. And again, if people will see that the game released only on 60 frames, they're like, okay, why for this game there is such ceiling, right? And in terms of issue that we have, one of the issues that I mentioned was that we've rendered the sprites in the high resolution that we need to, and it's kind of because the sprites they're already like in small resolution, but then we increase it just for the sake of it, and on PC you don't have this problem because PC is still much more powerful even than Gen 9, so you just don't notice that. So that was one fix, and another thing was. For the PC again, for GPUs, the data how we transfer to the GPU, the data formats that we used for PC it was fine, but then we figured out that for the consoles the bandwidth is smaller, right? So you need to use the more optimized structures, which was like maybe 2-3 lines change of code. But as you know, fixing the bugs, it's the time you spend on discovering and understanding what's actually happening.
Thank you. Do we have more questions? Great.
Yeah, so mostly you talked about reverse engineering, but have you tried with some game the other approach, like recreating it from scratch in Unity engine, Unreal, or something like that? And have you encountered all the pitas, like you can recreate that or something like that?
Actually, we didn't. So don't have this experience. I think our team is like mostly engineers, and we have a lot of experience with custom engines, and we don't have that much experience with Unity's Unreal. We do some projects, but I think if you do the recreation using like Unity Unreal, you need to have team just more than engineers. You need the artists, you need the like sound designers. So and for us it was easier to pick the project where we don't need this kind of people because we are mostly engineers. So like engineer approach.
Okay, thank you. Do you have anyone? Oh, this guy seems very interested.
I'm already, yes, thank you.
All right. Then I would love to ask my question as well. So you said sometimes it's pretty tricky to pick, like make a decision of either fixing something, like remastering it, or leaving it as it was, just to save the the feel of the game. Can you share like some more stories about those kind of issues on the Chasm or something else?
Let me think. No, it's even with the texture work, right? So by default, it should be pixelated. It should be smooth, right? Should we apply some of these techniques? I guess. And
does the player feedback play an important role in that, or?
Yeah, of course. Again, coming back to the demo, it was important for us. Some people ask us like, oh, we really need the texture filtering, like please add it. And we didn't want to add it to the game because I think it's ugly. So we just added in the config file and like just for you, change these things and it'll work.
That's great. Roger. So we are actually coming to the end of the session. If you have any other questions, well, I'm pretty sure you can find our greatest speaker somewhere in the halls, right? And yeah, have a great time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.